Hi, and welcome to Code Tutorials. Today we'll take a look at the Divided Showcase Carousel, one of the widgets from the Qi Addons for Elementor Premium plugin. With this widget, you can create gorgeous and dynamic visuals for your site. This first example of the widget's use is a showcase of a Qi theme homepage in the form of an image. This page in general shows the different ways of using and styling the Divided Showcase Carousel. As you can see, this element is a mixture of text and images. It's split along the y-axis into halves, with one side making room for text content and the other displaying a selection of images. And as the carousel rotates, both the text and images move to be replaced by others. So the amount of content you can display with this widget can be quite extensive. And of course, the kind of content you choose to display can be anything from portfolio previews or author showcases to something like product displays. You're only limited by your imagination when it comes to this widget. So let's see how it actually works and what you need to know to use it. In the back end, go to the Elementor sidebar and search for the Divided Showcase Carousel. There it is. Drag it over to the right. Alright, this is what the widget looks like by default. We have some text on the left and a series of scrolling images on the right. The images we see are 3 independent items, and they're arranged in 3 columns. That's why we can see them all at once. Each image is also attached to a different bit of text that appears on the left. But we'll see all that when we start customizing the items. Speaking of, you can add a new item by clicking here, or remove an item by clicking here. Okay, let's take a look at what options they have. The first is for replacing the subtitle text. Simply type over this placeholder and your text will appear here. I'll replace this, just a sec. Okay, this underneath is the title text. Just like before, you can replace it simply by typing over the placeholder text. A moment. There we go. And then we can add an image to complete our first item. I'm going to use this one, Insert Media. Alright, there it is. This customized image and bit of text are my first slide in the carousel. The last thing I can do for it here is add a link. By putting a hashtag as a placeholder, or in your case a proper URL, the slide's image and title will become clickable. Okay, those were the item options. I'll customize the other 2 items now, but we'll skip ahead for that. And here we are. The slides are done, the carousel is on its way to being customized. We have 2 more options under the items. One is the Enable button. By switching this to Yes, we are going to get a button. You can see it here under the title text. The button will appear on every slide and it will be linked to each item link that you set. So you enable it once, but you get it for however many slides you've created. And the other option is text animation. The default setting is fade in, and that's the effect we've been seeing so far when the slides switch. We have 2 more possible settings here. One is letter by letter, and if we look at the carousel now, we can see that the text appears gradually from the bottom. So letter by letter seems to rise up. And the third possible setting is fade in raw. If we opt for that one, text will just flick between slides. As you can see in the carousel, this makes for a more abrupt transition between slides than the default fade in. Alright, I'll go back to the default setting. Perfect. Now we have the slider settings section. The first option here is Enable Slider Loop, which keeps the carousel moving in a continuous circle. I'll keep this set to Yes. Then we have the Enable Slider Autoplay option. It's also set to Yes by default, and it allows the carousel to start moving as soon as the page loads. That way, visitors won't have to do anything to get it started, and it will already be running when they reach its place on the page. After that, we have the slide duration. By default, it's set to 5000 milliseconds. That's how long a slide will be visible before the next one comes along. If I set a smaller value here, for example 1000, then the slides will switch much quicker and the carousel on the whole will move faster. It's quite snappy now, but I prefer a slower pace, so I'll clear this to restore the default value. Next, we have the slide animation duration. This represents the amount of time that the animated effect, which helps one slide transition into another, lasts. If I set 200 to replace the default 800 milliseconds, you can see how it looks. The switch from one slide to another is much quicker. You can slow this down by adding a bigger value, but I'll simply clear this to get the default setting back. Alright, following this we have the option to enable slider navigation. By default it's enabled, so we can see the navigation arrows here and here. You can disable it if you like, and in fact that's what I'll do. Then we can pick if the pagination will be enabled. This is also on by default. The pagination bullets are here. I'll keep this and set yes, so a glance at the options will immediately tell me what's enabled and what's not. Under that, we have the image proportions option, so we can pick what proportions we want for the image. You have numerous options here, and you can try them out to see how they work with your planned design. However, I want a neat band-like carousel, so maybe the thumbnail would look nice? Quite nice. But as the images I uploaded already have suitable dimensions, I can return to using the original setting. Okay, next we can enable partial columns. So if I switch this to yes, and then increase the partial column value, let me increase it even more, then we'll have this partial column, like a hint of an upcoming slide in the carousel. And the value goes up to 0.9. So you can show up to 90% of this partial sneak peek slide. If you were to put 1 here, you'd end up with 4 columns. Still, I don't plan on using this, so no to partial columns. Okay, and after that we have the number of columns option. You can pick anything between 1 and 8. For my carousel, I'll set 2. There we go. Now only 2 images are visible at a time, with the third popping in as a surprise. And this is the number that will be visible on desktop screens. However, for other screen widths, we have this option, columns responsive. We have predefined and custom. With custom, you can pick the exact number of columns that will appear on the different ranges of screen widths you see here. However, I'll pick predefined as that will work just as well with my 2 columns. Then we have the space between items. By increasing the value here, we can increase the gap between the images. For my design, I'm going to set 25 pixels as the space between items. There, now the gap is narrower than the default setting. And that completes the slider settings section. The next one in line is the button section. For everyone who enabled the button earlier, we can now pick its layout. The default is with SVG background, and that allows us to set an SVG image or pattern as the button background. The alternative is gradient, and that gets us a 2-color gradient button background. I'm going to stick with SVG and set a shape as my button background. You'll see in a minute. As for the other button options, most of them should be clear as is. Their names are pretty self-explanatory, but we do plan on making a separate video where we'll break down the button options in detail. For now, I'll simply go through them and make the settings I need. That includes changing the button text. There we go. You can see the new text within the carousel. Alongside that, I'm going to enable the button text underline. Now the button text has this line under it. And this brings us to the SVG field where we can select the image we want to use. I mentioned I wanted to use a shape, and there it is. Insert media. Okay, we can see the SVG is here. It's the same color as my button text, so it doesn't look that great right now, but I'll be styling it shortly. Before I do that though, let's finish up with the options in this tab. There's the SVG type. It can be set to cover, so it fits within the space set aside for the button, or it can be set to full size so it shows the SVG in its actual size. This is what I'll be keeping. Now we have 2 more sections in this tab, and these are something you get with all of our widgets. The first is the Developer Tools section. It has one option that, if you switch it to yes, will display the widget in the form of a WordPress shortcode, this light gray text, which you can easily copy for use elsewhere on your site. Alright, I'll switch this back. And under that, we have the Help section. It contains links to various helpful resources that you can check out, including a link to our Help Center. And that's all for the Content tab. we covered all the sections with the options here, which means we can move on to the next tab, Style. And now that I'm here, the first thing I'll do is fix up the SVG button background that I set. So I need the button SVG style section. The first option here lets us set what kind of hover animation our SVG button will have. You have numerous choices you can try out, but I'll be sticking with scale. And this is what it looks like. Then we have the normal display settings such as the SVG fill color. So you can set whatever color you want for the SVG button background. We can see the circle is different now, and the color changes reveal the text on top of it as well as the existence of an outline, i.e. the SVG stroke. So I want to keep the text visible, that's what I set out to fix. But I want to use a different color for the background, so I'll type in the hex code for the one I want. There. And I'll copy this code so I can add it as the SVG stroke or outline color. And speaking of the outline or stroke, you can easily set any color you like. You also have a few options for styling it further. I'll run through some of them now just to give you an idea of the possibilities. We have the stroke dash offset option, but first I'll increase the stroke width so we can see it better. Okay, there it is. And now I can make a dashed outline by using the stroke dash array option and setting 20 and 20 as the values. Now the outline or SVG stroke has this wheel-like look. And to add to that impression, I'll set 0 for the stroke dash offset. But we have the same option in the hover settings, and if I set something different for the stroke dash offset hover, we'll get an animated effect on hover where the wheel seems to turn. And you can change how swiftly it turns by adjusting the stroke dash offset timing. If I set 8 seconds, then the effect will look like this. As I said, this was just a run through to give you an idea of what you can do. But my design doesn't include any of these special effects, so I'll clear all the settings I just made. I plan on having an SVG circle shape that's going to have the same fill and stroke color, so it'll end up being comparatively plain. Okay, paste. And there, this is the look I want. Before we move on, I skipped a few hover options. So we have the fill hover color, which looks like this, and the stroke hover color, which can create a differently colored outline on hover. Oh, I need to increase the width for it to become visible. And there, this is what it might look like. I'll reset all this now. Just a sec. Right, that wraps up the button SVG style section. And now we can start going through the rest of the style options from the top. The first section is for styling the carousel navigation. I don't have any options here because I disabled my navigation. I'll enable it at the end so we can see what options you'd get there. For now, let's check out the pagination style options. We can pick if the pagination will be inside or outside of the carousel. The current setting is inside, even though we can clearly see the pagination is not within the carousel. This is because there is some vertical offset set by default. Because of it, even if I switch this to outside, my pagination will be virtually in the same spot. Again, this is because of the default offset value. I'll show you how to adjust it in a bit, and I'll stick with the inside position for that. Next, we have the pagination alignment. By default, it's set to start, so the bullets are on the left. We can put it in the center, so that's the center or the carousel side with the text. Finally, we can set it to end, and then the pagination bullets will be here at the right corner of the text half of the carousel. I'll go back to using the default start alignment. Then we can choose whether to replace the bullets with numbers by switching this option to yes. And now instead of the pagination bullets, each slide is marked with a number. Okay, now we come to the pagination offset option. By adjusting the value here, we can adjust whether the pagination will be closer to or further away from the carousel and its content. For the value here, I'll set 73 pixels. With the offset changed, if I go back to the pagination position and set outside, there, the pagination has clearly moved outside the carousel. Okay, I'll go back to using the inside setting. Not only is it useful for showing you the options, but it's also part of my planned design. Right. Now, after this, we have a few options that can differ based on whether you have the normal or the active switch enabled. Under normal, we have the pagination color, so you can easily change the color of the pagination bullets if you want to. Besides that, you can add a border to them. Simply pick a type, add a width, and I need to increase the pagination size to make all this visible. To do that, you can drag the slider or type in a value. I'll set 9 pixels, and then going back to the border, you need to set a color, and voila! Now each pagination bullet has a 3 pixel wide border. Okay, I'll clear this as I don't plan on using a border. And if we switch over to the active settings, we have the pagination active color. So the bullet connected to the slide on display, or one that we hover over, can show a different color. Other than that, we can set a new border that will appear on hover and on the active bullet. And this is what your bullets might look like with an active hover border. Alright, I'll reset this. And that brings us to the final pagination option, the space between bullets. Using it, we can adjust how far apart the bullets will be from one another. For the value here, I'll set 17 pixels. Alright, there we go. The pagination looks quite nice. So let's check out the next section, the text style. The options here will apply to this title text. And the first thing we can do is set the text tag. You can pick anything from H1 to H6 or even the P tag. I'll use H1. Okay. Then we can set the text color. It has the standard color picker, so it's easy to make the change to whatever color you like. I'll stick with the default for this. And after that, we have the text typography. It's a collection of options that includes things like the font family. There are hundreds of fonts that you can choose from here. Then there's the font size. You can use pixels, ems, rams, or the viewport width as the units. After that, the weight option offers all these settings for adjusting the font weight of the title text. The transform option can change the text if you'd like it to be, for example, uppercase. The style option can make the text italic if you like. And the decoration option can be used to add a line under, over, or through the text. Finally, the line height, letter spacing, and word spacing options can help us sort out any spacing issues. And that's it for the typography options. Following that, we have the text padding option. You can increase the values evenly, and as you can see, only the fields for the right and left sides are active, so we get padding on both sides of the title. However, if you don't want to have the same values on both sides, you can delink the fields to enter separate values. Click here, I'll switch the percentages for my padding, and set 20% for the right side. And that's it. Now I have more space here and my text is in 3 lines instead of 2 because it's been pushed by the padding. Okay, let's take a look at the subtitle style section now. These options apply to the short text above the title, and we can change its subtitle tag. We have the same selection of tags as before. Then we have the subtitle color option in case we want to change the color for it. After that, we have the subtitle typography. As we've already gone through the selection of options that comprise the typography, I'll make the adjustments I need and we'll carry on. So I'll set size to 17 pixels and let me see, that's all actually. Alright, carrying on. After the typography options, we have the subtitle margin button. It lets us create more room between the subtitle and the title by adding space here. As for the value, I'll set 12 pixels. There we go, subtitle done. Next, we have the button style. All these options are here to help us adjust the look of our button. The first is the button text typography. Again, it's the same selection of options, so I'll just change the size to 17 pixels, and as we already know what the rest of these options are, I'll move on. Under the typography, we have the alignment, which can be left, center, or right. I'll keep mine on the left. After that, we have the normal and hover switches. So for the normal display, we can set the button text color. And if I set something, you can see how the button has changed. I have a specific color in mind for this, so I'll set the hex code I need for it. There we are. And in the hover settings, we have the text hover color. So the color you set here will appear only when we hover over the button. Okay. After those two, we have the button text rotate option. By changing the value here, we change the degree of rotation of the button text. The values can be both negative and positive, so the text can turn full circle. I don't plan on using this right now. And our final option here is the padding. You can see how the button moves when I change the value. As you can see, this primarily affects the button text. I'll set 0 here. That will put the button text up against the element side and make the SVG shape follow the text. Alright. After this, we have the button underline style section. With the options here, we can change the color of the line under the button text. We can see how it differs now. You can easily set any color you like. Then you can adjust the underline width. That's how far the line will stretch to follow the text. And if you use that, you can also change the underline alignment. By default, it's on the left, but you can set it to the right or the center. So that's one possible look. I'll restore mine to the left and clear the width to get the full line back. Next, we have the underline offset. It lets us move the line closer to or further away from the text. I'll set 6 pixels for mine. Then the underline thickness can be used to make the line bolder if you like. And let's check out the hover settings. Here we have the underline hover color, an option that lets us change the color of the underline on hover, and also the underline hover width so we can adjust how long the line will be. And this is what my settings have resulted in, a shorter red line. Other than that, we can enable an animated effect for the underline. By switching this to yes, we'll get this effect where the line is seemingly drawn out when we hover over it. And those were the hover options. Let me reset them quickly. Alright, and there, okay. Now the following section is for styling the gradient type button. However, I don't have any options here as I'm not using a gradient button. I opted for the layout called SVG background. And the SVG button can be styled here using these options we've already seen earlier in the video. That leaves only the spacing style section. In here we can adjust the button margins. Only the top and bottom fields are active, so if I start to increase, the button will move away from the title text. That's because we have bigger margins over and under the button. Okay, as I want to have different values for these fields, I'll delink them by clicking here and then I'll enter 34 pixels for the top margin and 50 pixels for the bottom one. And there we go. This is what I wanted my carousel to look like. And since that's sorted, I'll press update to save my work. And here now, the carousel is moving, the 3 slides are here, the pagination is working, and all the display settings are just how I wanted. However, there is one last thing. I promised to show you the navigation style options. To do that, I need to go to the Content tab, open Slider Settings, and switch the Enable Slider Navigation to Yes. This will restore the navigation arrows to the carousel. And now we can see what style options we get for them. For starters, we can pick if the arrows will stay inside the carousel or if we want to switch them to the outside. We can see the left arrow is here, but the right one isn't shown as the carousel stretches all the way to the right edge of the screen. And the third setting is Together, which puts the arrows here so they overlap with the pagination. In this case, we can use the offset to adjust the height, or simply turn one or the other off. Okay, I'll switch back to the inside so we can go through the rest of these options. Next, there's the Hide Navigation option. It lets us set below which screen width the navigation arrows will disappear from view. So when your carousel shrinks to fit a smaller screen, the navigation disappears so it doesn't obstruct the view. After that, we have the Navigation Vertical Offset. This moves the navigation arrows up or down so you can adjust their positioning to your preference. And there's also the Horizontal Offset, which lets us move the arrows closer together or further apart. A positive value moves them inward and a negative one outward. Following that, we can replace the navigation arrow icons. You can pick something from the icon library or upload an SVG. Each arrow has its own field for upload. This brings us to the settings under Normal. One is the navigation arrow color. We have this familiar color picker so we can easily change the icon color. You can see the difference. And the other option is the background color for the navigation arrows. I'll keep it while we look at the remaining options. There's navigation arrow size, which can increase or decrease the arrow icon size, which affects the space or holder that contains the navigation arrow. Other than that, we can set the navigation arrow holder width, so we can make the containing space wider by adjusting this option. The change is visible thanks to the background color. There's also the navigation arrow holder height, which can increase the height of the containing space. So, using the holder width and height options, we can adjust the coverage of the background color. And we might get something like this. Okay. Over in the hover settings, we have the navigation arrow hover color. So we can set a different color that would appear when we hover over the arrow. Besides that, there is the arrow background hover color, which we can use to set a different background color that will appear on hover. Something like this, for example. Other than the colors, we have one more option here. Enable hover arrow move. It's set to yes by default, and it's responsible for this gentle animated movement when we hover. If we disable it, then the arrow will stay stationary on hover. Okay, this wraps up the slider navigation style options. I'll go back now and disable the navigation as it's not part of my planned design. Okay, I'll update again. This is the finished carousel design that I wanted. Now that you've seen how everything works, as well as all the options that come with the Divided Showcase Carousel, you'll be able to make this or any other variation of this widget for your site. If we look at the page we started from, you'll find another example of the Divided Showcase Carousel within a Qi theme demo page. You can use it as inspiration or a springboard for your own design. Ultimately, we hope you'll find this video helpful. If you have any questions after watching it, or comments or suggestions you'd like to make, please drop us a line in the comment section below. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be the first to learn about any new tutorials and theme guides. Thank you for watching.